In today's story, we're exploring 5 horrifying encounters where entitled behavior met deadly wildlife. From a safari tourist who ignored distance rules, to a volunteer who entered a restricted corridor with an unlocked gate. Let's begin with the first story, where one woman's demand for the perfect photo led her into the territory of Africa's apex predator. By November 14, 2014, Kruger National Park had been baked by the dry season for nearly 4 months. Temperatures reached 38 degrees Celsius by mid-morning, and the air carried the smell of dust and dried grass. The landscape stretched golden and brittle under the African sun, acacia trees dotting the savanna where herds of impala and zebra moved in constant vigilance. This was a country that demanded respect, where the line between observer and prey could vanish in the time it took to draw a breath. Jennifer Hartley, 42 years old, was the type of woman who spoke to service staff with condescension, who returned meals to kitchens with complaints, who believed her spending money entitled her to preferential treatment anywhere. She was a real estate agent from Connecticut who had built her career on an unwavering conviction that she knew better than everyone around her. She maintained an active Instagram presence with over 3,000 followers, posting carefully curated images, conveying a life of sophistication and adventure. Jennifer had arrived 3 days earlier as part of a 14-day South African vacation she had insisted upon, despite her husband's preference for a quiet beach resort. The morning safari had begun poorly from her perspective. The vehicle departed before sunrise, an hour she considered unreasonable for paying guests. Other vehicles appeared positioned closer to wildlife, and Jennifer spent the first hour demanding they move closer, despite repeated explanations about safety protocols and animal welfare. The guide, Jordan van der Merwe, had worked in Kruger for 12 years. He possessed the weathered patience of someone who had watched tourists ignore warnings for decades. He explained that vehicles functioned as protective barriers while people on foot triggered predator responses, a lesson written in the park's history books. Jennifer dismissed this as excessive caution, exchanging eye rolls with herself when he turned away. During mid-morning, the vehicle stopped approximately 50 meters from an acacia, where an adult male lion rested in the dappled shade. The lion weighed roughly 190 kilograms, with a thick, dark mane that spoke of dominance and maturity. He was one of 2 males controlling a pride of 7 females across a territory spanning dozens of kilometers. Passengers raised cameras, capturing images through windows that preserved the critical distance between human and predator. Jennifer examined her phone screen and found the image unsatisfactory. The distance reduced the lion to a small figure against the tree. Other passengers occasionally blocked her angle, amateurs who didn't understand composition. She could not achieve the close perspective she wanted. A distant lion shot would generate perhaps 100 likes. A close-up, the kind that suggested she had been right there, could break into the thousands and elevate her status among fellow travel influencers. She began muttering complaints loud enough for others to hear. Jordan noticed her movements and repeated the instruction to remain seated. Jennifer waited until he turned to answer another passenger's question about elephant behavior, then pulled the handle and stepped out. The sound of the door opening carried across the still air like a gunshot. Several passengers inhaled sharply. Jordan's head snapped around, his face draining of color as he processed what was happening. He issued a direct command to return, his voice carrying genuine fear. Jennifer ignored him, as she had ignored everyone who told her things she didn't want to hear. She took several steps forward, raising her phone to frame the lion. The distance now measured approximately 12 meters. The lion was magnificent in her viewfinder. Close, sharp, exactly the image she had traveled for. She crouched to improve the composition, her focus entirely on the screen. The lion had lifted his head at the sound, his amber eyes fixed on Jennifer with the focus of an apex predator assessing a situation. His ears rotated forward, processing auditory information. Every muscle in his forequarters tensed, energy gathering for explosive release. Jennifer shifted position again, a small movement barely perceptible, but to a predator's brain, movement in close proximity meant only one thing: prey. The lion rose and charged in a single explosive motion, covering the distance in less than 2 seconds. His acceleration exceeded 35 kilometers per hour within the first 3 strides. Dust exploded behind him. Passengers screamed. Jordan reached for his rifle. The lion struck Jennifer before she could turn, before she could scream, before her brain could register that her followers would never see this photo. The impact fractured her shoulder blade and 3 ribs. The lion's jaws closed around her neck, not severing but crushing. Her hands came up instinctively, pushing against matted fur, against muscle that did not yield. The lion shook her once, and the world became sound. The grinding of teeth against vertebrae vertebrae, her own choked gasp for air that would not come. Her trachea collapsed beneath the pressure. She tried to inhale and could not. The lion's breath, hot and foul. The acacia branches overhead spinning. The taste of blood. The diminishing roar of blood in her own ears. 20 seconds, 30, then nothing. Jordan raised his rifle, sighting along the barrel. A warning shot could spook the lion into tightening his grip or provoke an attack on the vehicle. Other passengers were screaming, some recording, none moving to help. He held his fire, waiting for the release that came after long seconds, as the lion's jaws opened and Jennifer's body fell limp to the earth. The lion stepped back, tail lashing, eyes still fixed on what lay before him. He turned after a long moment and loped back toward the acacia. Jennifer Hartley was pronounced dead at the scene by responding medics. The coroner documented catastrophic trauma to the neck, crushed trachea, severed carotid artery, spinal cord intact, but useless beneath the damage. Death by asphyxiation and blood loss. She would have remained conscious for an estimated 20 to 40 seconds. Her phone was recovered 4 meters from her body. Park officials updated safety briefings to emphasize that vehicles function as protective silhouettes, while humans on foot are immediately recognized as prey. Jordan von der Merwe took leave following the incident, though investigators cleared him of wrongdoing. Jennifer's husband returned to Connecticut alone, carrying ashes, and the knowledge that his wife's certainty had finally met something her confidence couldn't override. The incident reinforced a truth wildlife officials understood. Predators did not distinguish between entitlement and ignorance. Thousands of kilometers away in southwest Florida, another lesson awaited a woman who believed she had found a way to bypass nature's rules. On the evening of March 23, 2015, the sun descended over Cape Coral, Florida, casting long shadows across the residential canals. The air remained warm and humid, carrying the smell of brackish water. Laura Simmons, 37 years old, possessed the particular confidence of someone who had never been genuinely wrong about anything important. She corrected neighbors on their lawn maintenance, left notes on cars parked slightly over her property line, and believed her credentials as a veterinary technician entitled her to deference in any conversation about animals. The 37-year-old had relocated from Orlando 6 years earlier following her divorce, purchasing a canal-front home that she considered proof of her superior life choices. Her position at a local animal clinic reinforced her self-image as someone with special understanding of wildlife, an understanding she believed exceeded that of wildlife officials and anyone else who attempted to warn her. She carried an unshakable conviction that familiarity with alligators granted her immunity from the dangers others faced. Her neighbors, she informed them, simply didn't understand animals the way she did. Social media formed a significant part of Laura's identity. Her accounts featured hundreds of photographs documenting encounters with wildlife. She posted images handling juvenile alligators, swimming in canals despite posted warnings, and feeding turtles from her dock. She had begun calling herself a wildlife ambassador, a self-appointed title that satisfied her need for validation. Her followers numbered in the thousands, people who admired her apparent bravery. The alligator that frequented the canal behind her house had first appeared in November 2014. State records later indicated the animal was a mature male, measuring approximately 3.5 meters and weighing an estimated 270 kilograms. He had established a territory through approximately 2 kilometers of interconnected canals, patrolling his domain with the patience of an apex predator that had survived 70 million years of evolution. Laura had begun feeding the alligator in December 2014, initially tossing scraps from her dock. The behavior escalated over months as she purchased meat specifically for the purpose, establishing an evening routine. She documented each feeding with photographs, posting images that showed the massive reptile surfacing at her approach. Her followers marveled at her connection with the animal. She felt chosen, special, uniquely capable of bridging the divide between human and predator. Neighbors warned her about dangers on at least 4 occasions. Some approached her directly, expressing concern for her safety. Others filed complaints with wildlife authorities, who dispatched officers to speak with her about the illegality and danger of feeding alligators. Laura dismissed these concerns. She explained that this alligator recognized her specifically, that he associated her with food rather than viewing her as prey, that she had established a bond transcending typical human-wildlife interactions. During the early evening of March 23rd, Laura carried a plastic cooler containing raw chicken to her dock. The evening light had softened to gold, creating ideal conditions for photographs. She set the cooler down and walked to the water's edge, scanning for the familiar shape. The alligator surfaced approximately 10 meters from the dock and swam toward her. Laura removed a piece of chicken and tossed it toward him. He seized it and submerged before resurfacing slightly closer. This sequence repeated 4 times. With each feeding, the alligator reduced distance. He soon floated within 2 meters. meters, watching her movements with focused attention. Laura had documented the process with her phone throughout the evening. She knelt at the dock's edge to obtain a lower angle, leaning forward over the concrete. Her position brought her within 1 meter of the water. The alligator's eyes tracked her movement. The attack occurred without warning. His tail propelled his body onto the dock in an explosive surge. His jaws closed around Laura's right leg, teeth penetrating through skin and muscle to the bone. The force pulled her from her kneeling position and dragged her toward the water. Her hands grasped at the dock's surface but found no purchase against the 270 kilograms pulling her backward. The alligator pulled her into the canal where water depth reached 2 meters. Within seconds, both disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only expanding ripples and the overturned cooler floating against the dock. A neighbor who had warned Laura about the alligator 3 months earlier heard the commotion. He arrived within 2 minutes, finding the cooler overturned and chickens scattered. He called emergency services immediately. Emergency responders arrived within 15 minutes. Laura Simmons's body was located approximately 90 minutes later, 50 meters from her dock. The cause of death was drowning secondary to massive trauma and blood loss from the leg wound. The alligator was captured that evening and euthanized. Her phone was found 4 feet away, screen cracked, but memory still intact. Footage from the incident was kept away from the public due to its graphic content, and her social media was eventually terminated to avoid giving ideas to watchers. Wildlife officials emphasized that feeding alligators conditioned them to associate humans with food, dramatically increasing attack likelihood. They noted that at least 3 formal complaints had been filed in preceding months. The officers who had spoken with her remembered her confidence, her certainty that she knew better. Laura's death illustrated how familiarity could erode the caution that kept humans safe. She had believed her experience granted her immunity from rules that applied to ordinary people. The alligator had believed nothing at all. It had simply followed patterns encoded in its DNA over 70 million years. Across the Pacific in Australia's Northern Territory, another individual prepared to test knowledge against an animal that had survived 60 million years without learning fear of humans. As the sun rose over the Adelaide River floodplains on August 8, 2015, humidity filtered through layers of mist hanging over the water. The dry season had reduced river levels by nearly 2 meters, exposing mud banks where mangrove roots lined the shoreline. Crocodiles lay motionless along the banks, their eyes tracking movements. Dr. Patricia Caldwell, 34 years old, possessed the particular arrogance of someone whose credentials had never been questioned. The 34-year-old herpetologist held advanced degrees and had published 7 papers on crocodilian ecology, a record she mentioned frequently. She corrected colleagues on terminology, dismissed local knowledge as anecdotal, and spoke to fishing guides with condescension. Her postdoctoral research on saltwater crocodile behavior had been funded by a university grant, and she considered herself the foremost authority on the subject. She had arrived in the Northern Territory 14 months earlier, immediately establishing herself as difficult to work with. She rejected safety protocols she considered beneath her expertise, questioned rangers with decades of experience, and made clear that her academic credentials outweighed their practical knowledge. Local fishing guides learned to avoid her, recognizing the pattern of someone who believed crocodiles would respect a curriculum vitae. Her research subject was a male crocodile identified as Old Fang, measuring approximately 5 meters and weighing an estimated 600 kilograms. Biologists had tracked his movements for 8 years, documenting his dominance over a 4-kilometer section of river. Local fishing guides spoke of him with wariness, having learned to avoid his territory. Patricia dismissed their caution as superstition. Standard protocols required 2 individuals during water-based observation. Patricia had submitted a research plan including these provisions, but on August 8th, she launched her 3-meter inflatable boat alone, citing scheduling difficulties. Weather forecasts predicted rain that would disrupt visibility. The opportunity to document Old Fang during optimal conditions outweighed, in her assessment, the risks of proceeding without backup. The rules, she believed, were for researchers with less experience. Early in the morning, Patricia located Old Fang approximately 200 meters upstream. She cut the motor and drifted toward his position, preparing her camera equipment. The distance decreased to 10 meters. She noted the crocodile appeared relaxed, eyes half closed, respiration steady. She failed to recognize that crocodiles remain fully alert even in apparent rest. Saltwater crocodiles are ambush predators whose hunting strategy depends on remaining motionless until prey enters striking range. Their acceleration from rest exceeds any other animal in their environment. They possess the strongest bite force ever measured. Patricia had published papers on these adaptations, but knowing facts and internalizing their implications were separate things. Patricia leaned forward to adjust her camera. shifting her weight. The inflatable hull tilted. Old Fang responded instantly, his sensory systems detecting the pressure change. His tail propelled his body forward, jaws opening as he lunged. His teeth penetrated the reinforced fabric, creating multiple punctures that released air in steady hisses. The forward chamber began deflating, the boat listing as stability gave way to instability. The boat folded beneath her weight, throwing Patricia into the water. She surfaced, finding shredded hull remains. Old Fang had disappeared below, repositioning for a second attack. Old Fang surfaced 3 meters to her left, his eyes fixed on her. His massive head cleared the water. The second attack occurred within seconds. Old Fang seized Patricia's left leg below the hip, teeth penetrating through wetsuit into muscle. The bite fractured the femur at 2 points and partially severed the femoral artery, a tear rather than a clean transection, enough to release blood in surges rather than a single catastrophic flood. Patricia felt the leg go hot, then cold, then absent, shock masking the pain as her blood emptied into the water. She had perhaps 3 minutes of consciousness remaining. Her vision tunneled. The crocodile began the death roll but released after a single rotation when boat debris entangled his snout. A fishing guide who had warned Patricia about approaching Old Fang heard splashing downstream and recognized a crocodile strike. He reached the location within minutes, finding Patricia floating near boat remains, blood spreading across the water. Old Fang patrolled approximately 15 meters away. He used a gaff hook to pull Patricia toward his boat while maintaining observation of the crocodile. He lifted her aboard and recognized the severity of the leg wound, the partial femoral tear still bleeding, blood loss massive, her face gray, her eyes open but unresponsive. She was still alive but had already lost consciousness from hypovolemic shock. He radioed for emergency assistance while applying pressure. A helicopter medical team arrived within 30 minutes and transported Patricia to hospital. Surgeons worked for hours attempting to repair the damaged artery, but the combination of prolonged hypovolemia and tissue damage proved insurmountable. She was pronounced dead 4 hours after the attack. Cause of death: exsanguination from femoral artery trauma. The investigation revealed Patricia had been alone for 2 hours before the attack, approached within 10 meters of a large territorial male during dry season, and positioned her boat between the crocodile and deep water, likely triggering a predatory response from an ambush hunter who perceived easy prey in his strike zone. Crocodiles do not defend territory in the mammalian sense. They react to opportunity. Wildlife authorities reinforce protocols requiring 2-person observation teams and minimum distances of 30 meters. University officials noted that Patricia had violated multiple safety protocols in her research plan. Patricia's publications remained in academic journals, cited by researchers who would never know the woman behind them. Her name joined the list of scientists killed by the very animals they studied, a reminder that knowledge and survival share less common ground than most assume. Along the California coastline, another predator patrolled waters where humans frequently swam, waiting for someone else who believed they understood the rules. On October 8, 2015, the morning sky over Año Nuevo State Park remained overcast, with a marine layer that muted colors and softened edges. The Pacific Ocean stretched gray and restless to the horizon, swells rolling toward shore with the steady rhythm of distant storms. The air carried the smell of salt and kelp, cold against exposed skin. Elephant seals crowded the beach approximately 1 kilometer south, their massive bodies hauled out on the sand where bulls engaged in territorial contests. Melissa Bradford, 29 years old, approached life the way she approached her fitness classes, with absolute certainty that she knew best and everyone else was simply catching up. The 29-year-old fitness instructor worked at a boutique gym in Santa Cruz, teaching high-intensity classes that emphasized physical conditioning and mental discipline. She corrected clients on their form, dismissed safety modifications as weakness, and made clear that her certification exceeded the qualifications of anyone who questioned her methods. The warning signs at Año Nuevo were impossible to miss. Bright yellow backgrounds displayed red text warning of great white shark activity, with illustrations showing shark silhouettes and statements about risks of swimming near seal colonies. Melissa had seen these signs on every visit and had developed a dismissive attitude based on her 2 years of swimming without incident. She would ignore these warning signs, stating that she is safe in those waters. Shark attack data from the California coast showed that most encounters occurred during dawn and dusk, when visibility was low and seals were most active. Great white sharks hunted by detecting silhouette shapes against the brighter surface above, targeting the distinctive outline of seals. A human swimming with arms and legs extended, created a nearly identical silhouette from below, particularly in murky water. The sharks typically delivered an investigatory bite to determine whether the target was prey, but the force of such bites often proved fatal regardless. Melissa entered the water at first light, wearing a black wetsuit that further enhanced her silhouette against the surface. She swam parallel to shore at approximately 50 meters, her stroke smooth and powerful. No other swimmers were visible. She had the ocean to herself as the sun began burning through the marine layer. The shark that approached Melissa was a subadult male measuring approximately 4.5 meters and weighing an estimated 700 kilograms. Acoustic tracking data from the region had recorded multiple tagged sharks in the vicinity over preceding days, part of a seasonal pattern that brought young white sharks close to shore during fall months. The shark had been patrolling the area since before dawn, following the coastline in a pattern consistent with hunting. Witnesses on shore observed Melissa swimming approximately 100 meters south of her entry point. Moments later, they saw an explosion of water as the shark struck from below. The force lifted Melissa partially out of the water, her body arching backward before crashing back into the surf. Blood immediately colored the water around her. The shark had targeted Melissa's left leg, jaws closing around her upper thigh with force estimated at more than 1 ton per square centimeter. The bite severed the femoral artery and crushed pelvic bone before the shark released, its investigatory bite complete. Melissa remained conscious for perhaps 90 seconds, her survival instincts driving her to swim toward shore even as her blood pressure dropped and her vision tunneled. By the time surfers reached her, she had already lost consciousness. Surfers reached her within minutes, forming a protective circle and lifting her onto boards. Paramedics arrived at the beach within minutes, establishing treatment on the sand while preparing for emergency transport. Melissa Bradford was pronounced dead at a local hospital approximately 90 minutes after the attack. The cause of death was exsanguination due to transection of the left femoral artery. The 90-minute window between attack and death reflected the efforts of first responders, tourniquets applied on the beach, fluid resuscitation en route, surgical intervention attempted, but the complete transection had already done its work. The incident investigation reviewed park signage, shark monitoring data, and witness statements before concluding that no negligence had occurred. Warning signs were present and visible. Shark activity had been documented, and Melissa had chosen to swim during peak hunting hours despite these factors. Additional signage was installed at beach access points. Marine biologists later analyzed the attack in the context of regional shark behavior, noting the individual involved was never identified. The incident was logged as one of the few documented fatal shark attacks along that section of coastline. The morning marine layer had burned off by midday, revealing a coastline that gave no indication of the death that had occurred hours earlier. In North Carolina, behind fences that separated humans from animals, another kind of danger waited behind barriers designed to contain creatures whose strength exceeded anything the ocean could produce. On the morning of April 17, 2017, sunlight filtered through the trees surrounding a private exotic animal sanctuary in rural North Carolina. The facility occupied approximately 40 hectares of forested land, with enclosures and buildings arranged along gravel paths. The air carried the smell of fresh hay and commercial feed. Rachel Morrison, 26 years old, had never met a rule she didn't think she could improve. The 26-year-old social media coordinator had relocated to North Carolina for a position at a regional nonprofit, but her true passion lay in the volunteer work she performed at the sanctuary. She corrected staff on their handling techniques, suggested better ways to manage social media content, and made clear that her fresh perspective offered improvements over methods developed over decades. The facility housed approximately 70 animals across multiple species, including big cats, primates, and various mammals. Among the residents was Marcus, a 32-year-old male chimpanzee who had spent the first 20 years of his life in a small cage at a traveling exhibition before being confiscated by authorities. Chimpanzees possess approximately 4 to 6 times the upper body strength of an adult human, with muscle fiber density allowing them to exert force far beyond their size. Their canine teeth can inflict penetrating wounds carrying bacteria capable of causing rapid and severe infection. The morning of April 17th required routine cleaning of Marcus's enclosure. The transfer procedure required 2 staff members to verify each step, confirming the holding area gate secured, opening the connecting tunnel, allowing Marcus to move through, closing the tunnel, then verifying the primary enclosure gate locked before entering. This system had operated without incident for 12 years. The senior keeper responsible for supervising the transfer had called in sick, leaving a less experienced staff member to oversee the procedure. Rachel was assigned to observe and assist with verbal confirmation, a role she had performed previously under supervision. The transfer proceeded normally, with Marcus moving through the tunnel into the holding area. The staff member closed the gate behind him and pulled on the bars to confirm it appeared secure. The gate design design incorporated a primary latch and a secondary pin-style lock intended to engage when fully closed. On this morning, the secondary lock had not fully engaged, though the gate appeared closed and held when tested from the corridor side. The gap measured less than 1 centimeter, invisible to casual inspection. Rachel had been instructed to wait in the main building while cleaning crews worked, but she saw an opportunity for content. The corridor adjacent to Marcus's holding area featured a large observation window, and morning light created favorable photography conditions. She had been frustrated by restrictions requiring approval for animal posts, viewing them as unnecessary limitations on her creative vision. She entered the corridor alone during late morning, carrying her phone and positioning herself near the window. Marcus sat on a platform inside the holding area, eating an apple and displaying relaxed posture. Rachel filmed for several minutes, occasionally narrating details of his rescue story for later editing. She stood approximately 3 meters from the gate separating the corridor from the holding area. Marcus finished his apple and dropped the core. His posture changed subtly, shoulders tensing, eyes fixing on Rachel with intensity she misinterpreted as curiosity. He approached the gate, knuckles contacting concrete with rhythmic thuds. Rachel continued filming, stepping closer to improve her angle. Chimpanzees investigate environments through manipulation, and Marcus had learned over decades that gates sometimes yielded to persistent effort. He gripped the bars and pulled, testing resistance. The primary latch held initially, but the incomplete secondary lock allowed the gate to shift. Marcus applied more force, his upper body strength engaging as he recognized movement. The gate opened outward with sudden force, throwing Marcus into the corridor. The distance closed in less than 1 second. Rachel screamed and stumbled backward, but Marcus had already closed his hands around her right arm. His canine teeth sank into her shoulder while his free hand struck her face and chest with blows that fractured her orbital bone and ribs. The attack continued with relentless fury. Marcus's strength, 6 times that of an adult human, allowed him to overpower Rachel completely. He dragged her to the ground, his teeth finding her face as she screamed for help that was seconds away but would arrive too late. Blood sprayed across the concrete floor, pooling beneath her body as her struggles weakened. His hands tore at her clothing, his jaws closing on her fingers when she raised them to protect herself. The damage was not clean or surgical. It was chaotic, brutal, the work of an animal whose strength exceeded anything her body could resist. Staff members heard the screams and recognized emergency. The first responder reached the corridor within approximately 1 minute, finding a scene of horror. Rachel lay motionless on the floor, her body ravaged, blood spreading in a dark pool. Marcus stood over her, his behavior oscillating between aggression and confused agitation, blood visible on his muzzle and hands. The responder discharged a fire extinguisher toward Marcus, the chemical cloud causing him to retreat from Rachel's body. 2 additional staff arrived with a tranquilizer rifle and darted Marcus from a distance. Paramedics arrived within minutes and attempted resuscitation, but Rachel had already lost too much blood. Her injuries were catastrophic: massive facial trauma, multiple bite wounds to the hands and arms, severe lacerations to the neck, and blunt force injuries to the head and chest that had caused internal bleeding and traumatic asphyxia. Rachel Morrison was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner later documented the cause of death as exsanguination from multiple bite wounds, combined with traumatic asphyxia and blunt force trauma to the head. Death would have occurred within 2 to 3 minutes of the attack's initiation, before emergency responders could possibly intervene. The sanctuary investigation revealed Rachel had entered the restricted area without authorization, that the secondary gate lock had been improperly engaged due to maintenance issues identified but not corrected, and that staffing shortages had placed an inexperienced keeper in supervisory roles. Recommendations included visual indicators on all gate locks, mandatory 2-person verification protocols, and retraining regarding restricted area access. Marcus was examined and found to have acted within normal chimpanzee behavioral parameters, given decades of traumatic confinement. Sanctuary directors faced a difficult decision. After consultation with primate behavior experts and ethics review, the decision was made to transfer Marcus to a specialized facility capable of housing chimpanzees with complex behavioral histories. Rachel's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the sanctuary, alleging negligence in maintenance and supervision. The case settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.